Alongside Sean Killerman, I am Daren Dunn. Tonight we talk basketball. And basketball. I'm not going to lie, let's be honest. It's a triple dosage of basketball as we start with men's. We'll talk a little bit of women's, and we'll even throw in some of the Big 12 conference standings for the men, talk about how that season might shape up and finish out. So first, we start with the men's basketball team, now 19-5, 9-2, after a huge victory in a sold-out Waco, Texas gym against the Baylor Bears.
It was a very big victory, Darren, and you know, looking back, it really gives you a great idea as to how big of a victory this was, because if Kansas had lost this game, you're sitting there with 3 losses and you got 2 teams ahead of you, hoping not only that they would both lose 1, but that they would both lose 2 if you're trying to win this conference outright, which obviously nobody likes sharing, especially in these type of situations. So KU, big win last night and got a monster performance from Jeff Withey.
Definitely. They get the win 68-54, but from Jeff Withey, they get a career-high 25 points. 15 of those came in the first half. Before we give Jeff Withey all the positives, let's talk some negatives. He had 6 turnovers as compared to just 1 assist. That hurts. Especially
in the first half, Darren. That's when a lot of that happened. The first 10 minutes or so in this game, there's about 9:40 left in the first half, and Kansas only had 9 points. Tyshawn Taylor ended up with 3 turnovers on the night. I'm pretty sure they were all in that first 10-minute span. And Jeff Withey and Thomas Robinson, I believe, also had 5 turnovers themselves. So a lot of turnovers, especially early for this Kansas team. But luckily, you know, against the number 6 team in the country, if you're playing pretty much your worst ball of the year and you're only down by 4 or 5 points halfway through the first half, you got to be confident that you'll come back and stomp on them in the latter part of that game, and that's definitely what the Jayhawks did.
Yeah, there's a time they were down 7-0 early out of the gates. Bill Self was forced to call a timeout. Later on, they were down 19-9. And then from there, things just kind of seemed to sort of fall in place for them. But 17 assists as a team compared to 19 turnovers. As they continue play in the Big 12, it's not going to matter who they're playing. If they're playing a ranked Mizzou or someone else that's unranked in the Big 12 conference at this point, 19 turnovers just isn't going to cut it.
No, it's not. And that's the thing, is that Kansas has done better recently from the turnover standpoint, but I don't know what got into them early in that game, because everybody, it seemed like, was turning over. The ball was all over the ground. Thomas Robinson and Jeff Withey, it seemed like it was just not a good situation for KU or Baylor, as all the players were just fighting for the ball on the ground. But the turnovers are something that, especially Tyshawn Taylor, he's really cleaned them up recently. You like to see better than a 17-19 assist-to-turnover ratio in any game, but KU found a way to overcome the turnovers and exploit the Baylor deficiencies in other ways.
Jeff Withey, a little bit of a different ball player from the last game to this game, and maybe even from the game we had when he played against Oklahoma. He talked about a first half that he had. It wasn't playing particularly well. Then he came out in the second half and he showed his ability to get the ball in the post and make right-handed hooks and left-handed hooks and finish just as he did right there. But then there's something to be said about his consistency. At this point, he's inconsistent. And a lot of people talk about Jeff Withey being a 7-footer. You know, they always make the comment, if I had his height, I would be dunking the ball every single time. I would be a much better player. But why, at this point in the season, because we're getting relatively late into the season with just about 7 games left in the Big 12 Conference, why is Jeff Withey still an inconsistent ball player?
You know, Darren, it baffles me how Jeff goes from having 6 consecutive games of double-digit scoring to 0 against Missouri to this monster game against Baylor, who is one of the lengthiest teams in the country. And my only thoughts of why this could be is that Jeff just does not like playing against guards, and that guards defending him is a big bother. He only played 20 minutes in that game in Columbia, and of course 0 points. He had 4 rebounds, and then he goes against, as I mentioned, a very long team in Baylor and absolutely dominates them. Of course, it doesn't hurt when you have a guy like Thomas Robinson on the other side of you, who's really drawing a lot of defenders. But Withey really did prove that he can be a go-to scorer in situations such as last night when Thomas Robinson really got into foul trouble early.
Yeah, and Bill Self talked a little bit about that. Thomas Robinson, having him down there on the post. But with the way Withey had been playing, the lack of Withey, I guess you could call it, guys didn't even have to guard Withey. They could just double-team Thomas Robinson. Here's Bill Self on a lack of Withey.
That was disappointing the other night to me, is we forced to play small because Jeff wasn't a factor. And if Jeff's not a factor, then you've basically guarded Thomas with Jeff and Jeff's man, and you've forced Thomas to play out on the floor defensively, which is not our strength.
Jeff Withey, obviously not a factor in the game against Missouri, but somehow found a way to turn it on against this Baylor team.
No doubt about that, and I think that really what hurt Baylor was their zone defense. I know that Scott Drew is a big proponent of the zone defense, and Baylor has played it a lot. Did not so much in the first game against Kansas, where Kansas really exploited that zone, and then, of course, again last night at the end of the first half, and then all throughout the second half, they did the same. But when you send Thomas Robinson up to the top of the key, the free throw line, and he's drawing all those defenders, or when you get penetration from Tyshawn Taylor into the lane, defenders are going to come up and attack the ball, and you know, KU is too talented to do that and leave anybody open. Tyshawn hit Jeff for a couple of alley-oops, and Thomas Robinson also had a nice few assists to Jeff Withey. So he was in the right spot at the right time, and it just was a good breakout game for him, something that the Hawks really needed.
So a great game from the big guy, Jeff Withey, but also a great game from the other big guy, Thomas Robinson, who's, you know, obviously the #1 big for KU, maybe even the #1 big in the nation, according to Dick Vitale. Last night, 15 points, 11 rebounds. He has a Big 12 best 17 double-double games this season.
That really is incredible when you think about it, Darren. I mean, 17 double-doubles, that's second in the country, and it seems like every night, you know, Darren, let me ask you this. When was the last time that Kansas had a player who, anytime he goes out on the floor, you're just expecting a double-double, and it doesn't even look, last night, I mean, I wouldn't say that Thomas Robinson played exceptionally well for how well Thomas Robinson can play, but for some reason, something about him, he gets to the ball, he's going to score his points, even though he's not a natural scorer. And, you know, I can't think of a guy in the past 5 or 6 years, you know, maybe Wayne Simeon, a guy who you expected to get a double-double night in and night out.
And I think a lot of it depends on who you have on your team. If you have a lot of guys that are prolific at scoring and prolific at rebounding, and you look at this KU team, that's kind of the guy they look to. They look for Thomas Robinson to do that. And what's incredible is what you were just talking about is the fact that he does it quietly. He kind of goes out there, goes about his business. He's really loose in pregame. He's all smiles. He's getting relaxed for a big basketball game. And a big basketball game is usually what he has. Even though it may not look like it, he's getting it done, and he's getting great statistics without maybe people even being able to bat an eye at it. But in addition to Robinson having double-digit scoring and Withey, you throw in Tyshawn Taylor, who had 19, and that's it. That's it for KU for their double-digit scores. After that, it drops down to 8, Connor Tehan. And after him, you're looking at guys who maybe had 1 point in this game, so they really didn't get the team production they would have liked when it comes to double-digit scoring from more than one guy. Well, I would say about 4 guys, 5 guys is what you would usually like to see.
And that has to actually give you, I mean, it's kind of bittersweet as a KU fan, because you look at that and you're thinking this team is not deep, they're not doing much, but let's be honest, KU went on the road and should have beaten Missouri with just 2 guys, basically, Tyshawn Taylor and Thomas Robinson, and Missouri is ranked 4th in the country. And then they go down to Waco in the Farrell Center and take on 6th-ranked Baylor, and honestly, it wasn't a game the majority of that second half, and Kansas had 3 guys, as you mentioned, Darren, who were beating them, and a lot of defensive intensity. But outside of that, not much for KU, but that's got to give you hope as a KU fan. If they can go in on a hostile environment on the road and really win with ease with only a few guys, bodes well for the rest of the season.
Yeah, KU head coach Bill Self very aware of what his team has to do and who they have to do it with. He talks about his starters needing to play about 32 to 35 minutes a game. One quick note of something that is you need to look at, I guess. Elijah Johnson, 0 for 6, including 0 for 4 from beyond the arc. What's it take for this guy to have a little bit of consistency?
You know, I'll tell you what it's got to take there. And it's going to take him getting into the lane and getting some layups, getting some 2-pointers. He showed he could hit that mid-range jumper in the last few games. I don't know why he continues to settle for the 3. 29% entering the game last night. And then he goes and shoots 4. Granted, they were all actually good looks last night. I don't have too much of a problem with him shooting those. He's got good form. But, man, he has got to lay off on that 3-point ball and try to get some dribble penetration and make some things happen, because right now he's trying to shoot out of his slump. What he needs to do is get some 2s and get some layups, get to the free throw line. That's the best way for Elijah to get out of his slump, because if Elijah is going to be another scorer for KU, this team is going to be really dangerous come March.
Layups definitely help. Getting to the free throw line helps as well. Speaking of that free throw line, KU in the first half, 90% as a team from that free throw line. And in the second half, they looked a little bit more like themselves, shooting 63.6, so about 72% overall for the game. Hey, when we come back, we preview the game against Oklahoma State this weekend, where the KU men will wear some retro jerseys. It's right here on KUJH-TV for Jayhawk Sports Talk. Welcome back to KUJH-TV for tonight's edition of Jayhawk Sports Talk. Alongside Sean Kellerman, I am Daren Dunn. We look now to this weekend, Saturday, when the Cowboys of Oklahoma State come into Allen Fieldhouse. They will not only be met by 16,300 plus fans in a sold-out Allen Fieldhouse, but they'll also meet the Jayhawks, who will be sporting the 1952 retro throwback jerseys from the NCAA championship season.
You know, Darren, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at these jerseys and shorts, but I'm pretty excited for it. Actually, some of my roommates asked me, you know, are they going to wear the short shorts as well? I don't think that's going to be the case, but it will be fun nonetheless to see the 60-year anniversary jerseys of the 52 championship team.
Yeah, the Michael Jordan era, I wouldn't look to see anybody with shorts that do not go past the knees. No more John Stocktons out there, at least that I know of. There may be some that I am unaware of. But coming into this game, Oklahoma State 12-12. They are 5-6 in the Big 12. Not that great of team, but a last-second jumper propelled them over Iowa State just by 2 in their last outing. So they beat a team that beat KU.
You know, they beat 2 teams that have beaten KU, actually. They also took down Missouri at home a few weeks ago. So this Oklahoma State team, I can't figure out. You mentioned 12 losses on the season. Normally, if you're looking at 12 losses and you get up to those double digits, you're looking at a team like Texas Tech for a conference record, who was 0-11 actually in the Big 12. But you mentioned Oklahoma State. They've got some firepower in them. They got a great freshman, LeBron Nash, who really, since that Missouri game where he scored a career-high 27, has really stepped up his game. They haven't gotten as much production as they liked out of Keaton Page. He is averaging over 14 points a game, but only shooting 33% from behind the arc. So you never know what Oklahoma State team you're going to see, but I expect KU to come out and play their game strong because, let's be honest, Darren, this is a very small Oklahoma State team. They're starting LeBron Nash at the 4 as 6'7". They also have a 6'8" center. But, you know, there's not much size on this Cowboys team.
Yeah, LeBron Nash has really come into his own. He's the second leading scorer overall, but he's the leading scorer for this team with over 15 points a game in Big 12 conference play. Right behind him is the guy you mentioned who's up half a point in conference play at 14.7 is Keaton Page, and he's just kind of one of those little wiry guards that's going to get past you. And you kind of frown at the 33% from beyond the arc, but let's be honest, 33% from beyond the arc is better than an Elijah Johnson 0 for 4.
Yeah, easy, Darren. Let's hope Elijah's watching so he can maybe start getting his shot to fall. But you mentioned it, 33%, and it seems like Keaton Page, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like every time he plays against Kansas, he likes to stroke it from deep, and he also gets to the free throw line a lot where he shoots, I believe, a 90% clip on the season. So Page is a guy that you're going to want to watch out for, and obviously LeBron Nash. Another guy who had a great game, 19 points against Iowa State, is Markel Brown. This is a guy who had a couple thunderous dunks from alley-oops in the game over #2 Missouri that Oklahoma State won in Stillwater that I referenced a few weeks ago. Markel Brown's got some ups. They got some athletes on this team, but I don't think it's going to be enough to contend with KU at the Fieldhouse.
Yeah, well, Brown is the third leading scorer that you bring up, and his numbers, again, of points per game are up in conference play. He averages 12.8, but he's also, I believe, their leading rebounder. The sad thing for him is he only averages about 7.5 per game, which is up actually from 4, which is what he averages overall. But to pull down 7 rebounds a game in the Big 12 Conference is no easy feat. But you'd still like your leading rebounder to be pulling down double-digit rebounds per game.
Oh, no doubt about that, Darren. And I think that's why Jeff Withey and Thomas Robinson are both going to have heydays against this Oklahoma State team. They're not as small and as quick as Missouri, which gave Kansas problems. I mean, they're post players for the most part. At least they're going to try to be on defense. And I think that's going to bode well for KU because, as we saw for Jeff Withey against a long team like Baylor and Thomas Robinson,